All right, we've got some news involving the Detroit Lions. Look, going through a little bit of a rough stretch here during the third quarter of the season. Home stretch, of course, is right in front of us. But it's important to understand what's going on with the Lions right now isn't outside the ordinary, especially when you consider the long-term strategy that the Lions are following. And we've got a report that highlights just that. We'll read from the report and then talk about it on the other side. This is according to the Detroit Free Press, excuse me. One of the curious personnel changes for the Detroit Lions in last week's loss to Chicago was the sharp reduction of rookie defensive back Brian Branch's workload. After logging more than 93% of the team's defensive snaps in each of the previous 5 games, he was on the field for just 52% of the snaps in the 28-13 defeat. The one thing I want to do with that player is let him focus in on one job, Glenn said. Talk about Aaron Glenn, defensive coordinator. I look at it in the same way when I had Chauncey Gardner-Johnson when I was in New Orleans. Listen, Branch was playing some safety, playing some nickel. There's a lot within that because of what we asked those guys at that position to do. So I wanted to make sure I dialed it back for him, let him focus on nickel, let him play nickel. I wanted to make it so he can concentrate on the nickel spot and really get that down, Glenn said, because he's a damn good player at that spot, and I want to make sure he plays as much as possible to be the best at it. All right, it's important to understand when you look at what the Lions are doing and their structure of their team, and you can see it at film sometimes. The Lions, although they're very good this year, they're barring something catastrophic, they're going to make the playoffs. They should win the NFC North. They're actually still planning to be really good next year and even the year after that. This was a 4-year rebuild the Detroit Lions were undertaking, beginning with Dan Campbell's first season. And their performance this season, while good, it's promising to see. It's important to understand that what the Lions are doing strategically is building the team to be a big time contender 1 or 2 years in the future. And one of the ways you can do that is making sure you're developing your young players, sacrificing maybe some in game performance, maybe even a victory during one season, knowing that it'll play dividends for you in the future. We're seeing that from Aaron Glenn here, and this is a strategy the Lions have used this entire season. We've seen it with how they've used Jameson Williams, how they've gotten different running backs involved. It's clear that while the Lions are certainly trying to win now, their eye is always focused on the future as well. And I think that's a really great decision by the Lions. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, Miles, but before I hand it over to you, Detroit fans, speaking of the future, you got a game coming up Saturday against the Denver Broncos, a feisty Denver Broncos team. They've been playing some good football. Give us your prediction, final score, Broncos versus Lions, in the comment section below. But Miles, what do you think of Aaron Glenn's comments here and the Lions' strategy for, well, trying to win every game, of course, still keeping an eye on the long term as well?
I think it's a really good strategy, Nick, specifically because you look at how people have done this around the league and what the results have been. Specifically, I'm thinking of a similar player to Brian Branch, that's Baltimore Ravens safety Kyle Hamilton. He
Good
plays
point.
all around the field, but last year specifically, he was getting stretched thin. He did a lot of different things, and there's a point in time where specifically they put him in that nickel cornerback slot for just a few games in a row, kind of really just like Glenn said, tighten things down, slowed it down. Because, like he said, for a young player coming to the NFL, to learn the nickel role and the safety role at the same time, that's a lot to ask somebody to do. I'm not saying Brian Branch isn't capable of doing it, but let's get him really good at one thing. And then once he is great as a nickel, we can start branching him out as a safety from time to time and ease him into it that way. Don't throw him into the lion's den, so to speak, on both positions at the same time. Let's ease him into one and then let him test his feet in the waters of the other one. Because I look at the success of a guy like Kyle Hamilton. He's been absolutely phenomenal this season. Last year, he was very good too, but I think it really started to show last year when they slowed things down, when they got him into more just one position looks during games so he can really just bite in and narrow down on one certain position instead of bouncing him all around the field. So I think this is a really great plan for Aaron Glenn. And like we've been saying, this is a long term move. This is not looking for short term success because, yes, Brian Branch has been a good playmaker, but I think it's more important to develop him as a player than it is to get some quick short term turnarounds with his play. So this great move by Aaron Glenn and showing the Lions aren't willing to sacrifice the future of this team for some short term success.
And let's put some historical context on this. I know Mize, I'm a big fan of NFL history, and people that regularly watch this channel understand I love bringing NFL history into these things. The Lions rebuild that they started a few years ago mirrors what the Dallas Cowboys did in the late 1980s when they were terrible in 89, around 500 in 1990, made the playoffs in 91, and then 1992 is when they started their 3 Super Bowl run in 4 years. The Lions are trying to follow that same model, right? The Cowboys traded away Herschel Walker, their only real star, for a lot of draft picks on a draft capital. That's exactly what the Lions did with Matt Stafford. The Cowboys went through one really terrible year. That's what the Lions did. In 1990, the Dallas Cowboys finished 7-9, just missed the playoffs. They lost their final 2 games. The Detroit Lions, again, just missed the playoffs, playing better football. 91, Dallas makes the playoffs, wins 1 game, gets bounced though, but things are looking better. Again, always focusing on the future, building their team, getting all the young guys up to speed. That's the year the Lions are in now, with the emphasis of 2024 and 2025 being the big time breakout. And there's another fact that anyone who follows football, especially if you follow football in the NFC, understands that if the San Francisco 49ers are healthy, they're pretty much unbeatable. They're a juggernaut. They wax Dallas, they wax Philly, they wax Jacksonville. When the 49ers are healthy, they can just beat everybody by 30 points. And right now, if you're the Lions, you don't want to go all in this season, and nor should you. Give it a year or two, get all these young guys up to speed, and really focus on being a big-time, legitimate Super Bowl contender in the future. And that's exactly what the coaching staff is doing here. Again, they're not sacrificing short-term victories. It's not what we're saying. But again, always keeping an eye on developing these young players, allowing them to grow and get better and better. That's smart coaching, and I think it'll pay dividends for the Lions in the future.